keep my head up when I act, head up, that's a fact. Never looking back, I'ma keep myself on track. Keep my head up, staying strong, always moving on. Feel
Now, in Britain, gambling is a big and highly profitable business. In the last financial year, its gross yield was worth £14.4 billion. That's up 4.5% on the previous year. So perhaps it's not surprising Britain's best paid boss runs a gambling company. Denise Coates, head of the online sports betting giant Bet365, pocketed £265 million last year, which is 1,700 times what Mrs May earns as Prime Minister. And how are these millions earned? Well, on the bets, punts and gambles made by 45% of us suckers every month. It's not just adults placing bets these days. A recent Gambling Commission audit counted 450,000 children betting regularly on fruit machines, fixed odds betting terminals, FOBTs, and online as well, despite it being illegal for under 18s. Should gambling be made socially unacceptable? Well, Charles and Liz Ritchie, tell us what happened to your son Jack. He's no longer with us.
Yeah, our son Jack killed himself last November because he was addicted to gambling.
Did he have mental health problems anyway, do you think, or did the gambling somehow give him those mental health problems, make him depressed, put him in a terrible place?
I don't think he was quite depressed. He definitely didn't have mental health problems before he started gambling. He was a perfectly normal, happy child. And he started when he was 17. So he was still underage, so it was illegal. But no, he didn't have mental health problems. It was completely started by the gambling.
An addiction to dopamine, to the thrill.
But also it undermines your sense of yourself.
Yes.
It made him feel controlled by something that was not him. And that was why he died. He felt utterly undermined as a person. He didn't feel he had a future. He said in his note, he said, "I'm the worst possible kind of child," to us. Which of course we would never, ever, ever think.
But it's important to know that actually he was very ordinary, very normal, very happy. For most of the time, you wouldn't have seen him as having a problem. He was out in Hanoi when he died. He'd been out there for 3 months. The people he was out there with were staggered. They were absolutely shocked to their roots when he took his own life. They had seen him as this bright, happy young man who they felt they'd known for years. He had fitted in, he was having a great time. And I think that's the problem with gambling addiction, is it is a very intermittent disease. You can be free for weeks or months at a time. Jack had been free from gambling for 6 months before he died. And I think that will have contributed to his death, is that he will have felt, to a certain extent, I'm free of this, I'm okay. And to then have a catastrophic fall back into gambling, not catastrophic in the amount of money he lost. Jack never lost huge amounts of money, but catastrophic in losing control and thinking, I am never going to be free of this.
It's quite a complex psychological process, this, isn't it?
Yes. So there's a long-term undermining of your sense of yourself. But then when you go into one gambling session on these fast-paced electronic games, it's not all sorts of gambling, then you crash out of it, but you feel controlled by it, and you feel totally undermined by it.
They're essentially relentless, aren't they?
Yes, it's so fast, and then you crash out of it. And it's also they're deliberately immersive, so like you're not aware of anything else that's going on.
And seductive.
Yes, very.
And you crash out of them, not because your body's had enough. It's not like alcohol or drugs where your body stops you. You crash out largely because you've got no more money, but you crash out physically, totally capable. Your brain is obviously all over the place. You're still in gambling mode. And actually, you crash out into that world of low self-esteem, of despair, self-loathing, your brain completely disordered in terms of your decision-making, and actually taking your own life maybe makes sense.
And Jack didn't wake up that morning thinking, I'm going to kill myself today. He was dead within an hour of crashing out of the session of gambling.
You're not anti-gambling, though, are you?
No.
I don't think we see gambling as a single activity. I mean, I think there's a world of difference between, I don't know, a bookmaker offering odds on horses and these electronic games. There are some
fixed odd betting terminals, and also was he playing online?
Yeah,
casino.
Absolutely, he was playing exactly the same games online. He'd actually gone through the process of banning himself from local bookies on fixed odd betting terminals, but the same products are essentially available online. And it is our belief that there are just some products in the gambling sphere which are just too dangerous to be on the market.
Yeah. Tony, you went through hell, didn't you? In fact, you had a relapse last year.
Yeah, I mean, I can really relate to what Charlie and Liz are talking about with, you know, obviously the tragedy of their son. I mean, I've had a whole life gambling addiction since my early childhood, but also when I was seen professionally, and I think by no less than 5 different psychiatrists, I was misdiagnosed and actually started medication for bipolar, a condition that I don't have, because the ferocity of my addiction was such that my mood states were being driven by the highs and losses that I was experiencing on a daily basis. So the impact on, you know, my mental health and what it was doing to my brain was such that, you know, seasoned professionals said, no, you're bipolar and we need to get you started on medication. And actually, you know, I wasn't.
Any thoughts in the audience about the social acceptability or unacceptability of gambling? Please put your hand up. I'm going to come to you in just a second. Anyone else over here? Who's had a flutter recently? Who's had a bet recently? Yeah, do you think that most people manage to gamble without any problem?
The lines between addictive behaviour and normal behaviour, normal interaction with gambling or alcohol or drugs, is you need to define that line. For me, it's never been a problem with gambling. I've played a lottery. I've often gone to the roulette and done quite well. I do think people need education on recognising adverse behaviour patterns so they can stop that addictive behaviour and recognise it when they're going into it. And I think education is the key to any addictive behaviour.
Yeah, Liz.
You can't just stop an addiction when you're addicted. You know, gambling addiction was defined as equivalent to drugs and alcohol in 2013. But we don't have proper recognition in the NHS and proper diagnosis. There's no treatment within the NHS, or almost none.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you like to say?
Yeah, well, my dad had a very serious addiction to gambling. He ended up going to prison after hiding his addiction for about 30 years. He remortgaged the house, he got into about £500,000 worth of debt. And, you know, my view on it is basically we've got these companies out here who, in my opinion, are essentially legal drug dealers putting products on the market which are really exploitative. They're very fast, they're very advertised, you can spend online pretty much as much money as you like in a spin, in a turn of the roulette wheel. And, you know, we've got to treat it as a public health crisis. It's something which has not been properly regulated. The Gambling Act is from 2005.
OK, let me do that first point. Fraser.
Yeah.
Fraser, they're drug dealers here. We've got the comparison there.
Well, it's an interesting comparison. I mean, if you think about the attempts to clamp down on drugs have been totally unsuccessful. It's pushed the industry into the hands of organised crime. And, you know, I think the problem, we're talking about social stigma, right? Should it be socially acceptable? Surely, if something is seen as less socially acceptable, if it is stigmatised in a certain way, then people are actually less likely to get the help.
What about all these young people who are gambling?
Well, if you look at the statistics, what you have to remember is 11 to 16-year-olds. You know, it is also legal for 16-year-olds to buy a lottery ticket, so you should discount those people. Most of them are private bets between friends, completely normal thing to be doing.
For kids?
Well, you know, for young children. When you're a teenager, you're starting to experiment with adult behaviours. We know that's true. We know we've all had a drink underage, probably under 16 as well. I think that there is an attempt to generate a moral panic around this issue of kids in order to have a broader conversation, in order to have a broader clampdown on adult behaviour.
Why do you think it's a moral panic?
Because I don't think that, you know, the fact is it isn't a large number. They're historically low levels. 2017 was the peak of children gambling. We're actually slightly less than that. Sorry, we're slightly higher than It's historically low. If you look before 2017, it's actually a lot higher.
OK, but I've read some of your other stuff, which is always very interesting, but you said there was a moral panic as well about spice. I saw one of your articles, but it's similarly addictive. But what about these fixed odds betting terminals? They're lethal, aren't they?
No, they're not. I mean, you might have heard this phrase, the crack cocaine of gambling, to describe them. The person who came up with that phrase was none other than Mr. Donald Trump. And he came up with the phrase because he's a casino magnate, and he was trying to basically destroy the video poker terminals, which were ruining his business. Now, there is actually a big industry battle at the moment between casinos and betting shops, and I think...
Are they dangerous, fixed odd betting terminals, yes or no?
I don't think they're dangerous. I think...
Matt.
Well, they are the most addictive form of gambling if you look at the proportion of people that are addicted to them compared to the total number of people that play them. So you're talking about 43% of people who use fixed odds betting terminals are either problem or at-risk gamblers. And the vast majority of the profits on those machines is coming from people with gambling problems. So, look, it's £100 a spin, and in a place, as you said earlier, a place like Bradford,
now, isn't it?
It's going to go down to £2 in April. That's 240 terminals taking £100 every 20 seconds, up to, in a place like Bradford, all over the country. So look, these are big problems. And I just want to take the point there about, well, we haven't legalised drugs and it's gone into the hands of criminals and all that sort of stuff. Look, the problem we've had with gambling is we haven't just legalised it, we've liberalised it. And we liberalised it at a time, the 2005 Gambling Act, before we knew anything about smartphones, before internet gambling had really taken off. And actually, we're in a situation now where 60% of the money that's lost online is coming from people who are problem or at-risk gamblers.
Yeah, the technology has completely changed the game, hasn't it?
And what's socially unacceptable is not the bricks and mortar gambling, going to the races, the social aspect of gambling, whether you have human interaction. What's socially unacceptable is these products online, which are highly addictive.
And antisocial.
And antisocial.
But the fact is that despite these products, despite fixed odds betting terminals coming in the last 10 years, despite the growth of online gambling, participation in gambling has gone down. And the rate of problem gamblers has been relatively stable.
But
it's about 0.6, 0.7, 0.8.
No, the profits wait, hold on.
It flits between those numbers.
Participation's down and profits are up, then what does that suggest?
Well,
it suggests people are losing more, right?
As Matt said, I think...
Well, yeah, gambling is about losing. You're going to lose if you're
losing what?
Tony.
As Matt said, I think what's going on here is there is a social side to gambling. Millions of people in this country enjoy gambling, enjoy a punt. But then you've got a dark side of gambling, which is where the big business is putting all their focus on. And the FOBTs absolutely are dangerous. And if you look at the number of people play them, so I think 76% of the British population have a punt in one form or another each week on gambling, but only 4% of people who gamble play the machines. So it's a tiny minority of people, and yet they contribute an exorbitant amount of profit, over 50% of the bookmakers' profits, £5 million a day. Now, that either leads you to conclude that you've got very rich people going in and playing these machines and the demographics don't support that, or actually it's people who can't afford to be playing it, people who are addicted to gambling, going in there, they're losing their salary, they're getting themselves into debt, they're committing all sorts of criminal activity for it. How can that be socially acceptable? And it's worse online.
OK, I'm going to speak to Mr. Declan in a minute, who's a professional gambler, but some hands have gone up in the audience. What would you like to say, sir? Good morning. Yeah, over here. And keep your hands up so I know where to come.
Well,
Quick point.
The key thing people don't realise is that using technology, there's so much psychology that goes into the research of how to attract people. Having worked in the industry for 29, 30 years, these things are really fine-tuned to keep you captivated for such a long time, whether it's the colours, whether it's the spins, whether it's the excitement. And once you're hooked in, it's very, very difficult psychologically to get out of that.
Yeah.
Many people with mental illness look for ways to self-medicate. And obviously many people will use alcohol and drugs. And if you have gambling out there so accessible and so acceptable in society, it's something else for them to use. And the gambling industry preys on those people.
Liz, you wanted to come back in here?
Well, I just don't see how you can possibly sit there and tell me that I'm part of a moral panic when my perfectly normal, ordinary, happy baby walked into an ordinary betting shop when he was at school during his dinner hour with his friends and was infected with a poisonous illness from which he died. I think you should meet all the other families from our charity, Gambling with Lives, who have all lost children in the same way.
I think it is absolutely a tragedy. There are so many tragedies that happen in this way, but we have to recognise that it is a small minority. And
how do you know? You just don't know that. There is no recording of gambling as part of deaths. We have no treatment as part of the NHS. We have a recognised health, life-threatening condition that then is not treated as part of a public health strategy or the NHS.
I just want to nail something down.
Yeah.
John Marr, you're a professional gambler, right? And you also give people advice, and it's all about horses. You have a phrase I was reading on that: winning takes work and dedication. But you're not talking about these games of chance, are you, Declan?
I think it should be a really, like, gambling in a really broad term, but I think there's a big distinction between betting on sports and these casino games like online, blackjack, roulette, and the fixed odds betting tournaments.
Would you ever bet on one of those?
No, I would. I've been in Vegas and I might sit and have a fiver on roulette at the end of the night just as a social thing, but I wouldn't be trying to win or anything like that because you can't. And I think that's something that maybe should be taught more as well. If people were maybe more aware of probability, it amazes me when I talk to people about my job and they ask questions and they're very, very ignorant of probability, and they don't seem to understand. Maybe if it was taught better in schools with maybe more real-life examples.
Can you make a living doing what you do?
I make a living. I've been doing it for 18 years, but I work hard at it. And
looking at the form, looking at the course, looking at all the other factors.
Looking at everything, video analysis, research. Like, I build models and look at past results. Try to come up with angles that I think the market has underestimated, stuff like that. But
are you in profit?
Well, yeah, it's my job. Like, and I have a tipping service, and it's doing very well. But
are the bookies not terrified of you?
Well, but that's the thing. Bookies will close accounts if you're winning money, your accounts will get closed, and people that follow my advice get accounts closed. But I do think there should be a massive distinction between sports betting and the other thing, because we're sports betting people research, and if you're right about your team winning, say Man United winning.
I understand. Research, Tony. I
would agree with Declan. I think, as I said, there's a social side to gambling. There's nothing wrong with having a punt. But you know, the big operators.
Does this not? I mean, are you an addict? Do you think? Could you stop? Could you never have another bet? Are you kind of? It's addiction, but you're calling it vocation.
No. Well, it's my job, so if I stopped, I wouldn't be able to eat. But no. Well, no, you're not an addict. Well, how do you define an addict? Like, is it not? Is it something that has? Like, I looked up.
Could you never have another bet in your life if you got another job?
Could I? I could, but I wouldn't want to, so I wouldn't do it because I wouldn't want to do it.
I don't belong, tell my thoughts to move along, push myself to be the best, die with no regrets, live with every breath, see my message start to spread, and I had so many dreams, then you hit your teens, life ain't really what it seems, try to find out what it means, always do it on my own, so I gotta get through it, and the only thing I know is to love what I'm doing.